Thank you very much, Jill. First of all, my name is Rory Digby and I will be chairing today's webinar, and I'd like to welcome everyone who has taken the time to attend here today. This is the first in a series of webinars that Kainos will be hosting on Workday testing best practices. The first webinar in this series is based on Workday security testing. Our first speaker is my colleague Will Murray, who will first present the Smart Security Test Strategy for Workday and then give you a product tour of the Smart Security module. I'm also delighted to introduce our two guest speakers today, Greg Holliday from SCI and Christian Soikens from AstraZeneca. Both Greg and Christian will be providing an overview of their Workday implementation, talking about the challenges of their testing, their Workday security configuration, and discussing their use of Kainos Smart. As Jill mentioned, we will be finishing today's webinar with a Q&A session, so I would again encourage everyone in attendance to submit their questions throughout. We will try to get through as many questions as possible, but if your question isn't answered today, rest assured that we will follow up with you directly over the next day or two. Kainos is an IT services company and we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. We continue to grow strongly and currently have 820 employees located in 9 office locations throughout Europe and the US. In terms of Workday, Kainos have pretty much went all in. We have been an implementation partner for over 5 years now. We are also a Workday customer ourselves, and through all that time, we have been Workday's primary testing partner. Those things combined have provided Kainos with unique insight into Workday and has allowed us to build our automated testing product, Kainos Smart, which is going into its 3rd year this summer. At this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Will Murray.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rory. As Rory mentioned, my name is Will Murray. I've been working with Kainos for over 8 years now, specifically within the Workday ecosystem for the last 4. Prior to that, I've been working in software testing for over 20 years. I'm going to be talking to you today about some testing best practices, specifically Workday security configuration testing. So in the next section of this webinar, I will bring you through how to minimize the risk associated with Workday security testing and outline a strategy that will give you the peace of mind that everything that is needed to be done has been done. And finally, a brief product overview of the Kainos Smart Security module and how this can help to streamline your security testing for you. So what are the key objectives of security testing? Well, it's really all about getting overall assurance in your security configuration and how you can achieve and maintain this. You need to plan how to manage changes to your configuration, be it any acquisitions, rolling on any new modules, reorganizations, workers moving roles. You need to know when to run your test cases, and you need to ensure that your test strategy and your test cases can be easily reused. So let's get into the security test strategy itself. So I'd like to go through a number of definitions that I'm going to use throughout the rest of the webinar just to give you an explanation of the terms. The first one is the test subject. Now, the test subject really is the person whose security we're actually going to be testing, so who you're going to be logged in as and whose security you're going to be testing. Nextly, the target objects. So these are what the test subject has access to within your Workday tenant, be it workers, positions, organizations, or any other different type of Workday objects. And then we go a level deeper into the actual test coverage. So these are the available actions and the field permissions that the test subject has access to against the test object or test target. So if we look at what this looks like within Workday itself, this is our Kainos GMS tenant. So our test subject is our old friend Logan McNeil. She's who we're logged in as. Our test object is going to be a worker. It's going to be Alan Dubois. And our test coverage is going to be the related actions that Logan McNeil has access to against the Alan Dubois worker. So hopefully that explains everything that, for the next few slides. So we have a number of steps that we go through to create a good and comprehensive test strategy. The first of these is agreeing the test subjects, so who you're going to test. Next is agreeing the object types and the test coverage. And our fourth step is actually looking at your specific tenant. So it's the actual workers, positions, organizations within your tenant that we need to test. So this is when it starts to get specific to the tenant that we're testing. We set the expected results and then we run the tests and review if our actual results have met our expected results and if necessary, make any configuration changes. So how do we go about selecting the right test subjects to test? Well, we first start talking to our customers about selecting test subjects. More times than not, we're asked, where should we start? There's maybe thousands, possibly tens of thousands of workers in your system, and it's not possible to test them all. So firstly, we'll look at user-based security groups. These are the workers who have tenant-wide access, super users within your tenant. Next, we'll look at role-based security, and these are the workers who support key roles within your organization hierarchies. And finally, we look at standard workers. These are the people with no special security rights assigned to them in your tenant. They're the rest of the workforce. Workers here will represent the most of your population of your tenant, so it's important to target a selection of these for testing. So how do we decide what workers to choose? We usually start with a selection of the most commonly used Workday delivered security groups. You can see them here on screen, but it is important to select workers from the security groups which are most important to you. We will go through a process of selecting a worker from each of these. Our second selection of workers are based on those who occupy key roles. So there are many roles available to use in your Workday tenant, and this list of 10 are the most commonly used. We would select the roles that are most important to you and your requirements in your tenant. For any of these key roles, you'll find the same worker inheriting that role throughout different levels of the organization hierarchy. So our recommendation is to target those workers just once in your selection. And for good coverage, target up to 6 individual workers for each role. Let me explain with a simple example here. These are the workers supporting my HR partner in the hierarchy. You can see Sarah supports 4 different organizations, but we only need to select her and test her security once using one of these supervisory orgs. In this example, for good coverage, we will also include 5 other workers along with Sarah to complete our HR partner coverage. And finally, standard worker selection. As I mentioned, this is the majority of the worker population in your tenant. Here we will select a number of workers from your organization hierarchies, such as supervision, division, location, cost center. But it's good practice to do a diverse selection. This is a balanced selection across the organizations, and the number selected will really depend on the size and complexity of your organization. So we've now completed our first step, and possibly most important one: who are we going to test? Next, we need to select target types. These are the objects in Workday that we are going to test against. Now, as you can see, I've split these up into 3 groups: user, role, and standard. In general, we use target objects such as fellow workers, positions, and organizations to test security configurations. But there are slight differences between the 3 groups in terms of how we go about targeting the testing. For example, if the role we are testing is a manager, we target our testing on the organization and the workers in the organization that the test subject supports as a manager. And this is because user-based worker selection is really targeted to the related organization that the test subject supports in that role. Now we've selected the object types we want to test, we next decide the actions and fields we want to check against those objects. For example, for a worker object, this could be the change benefit action as shown here in the screenshot, or it could be a compensation field. The good news is that for each of the object types I've just discussed, we have pre-selected a recommended set of actions and fields. You can obviously add to this, but based on our experience working with now 60 clients, it is a really good starting point. Now, if you want more detail on this, please contact us. The contact details will be at the end of the webinar, as Rory said, and we'll be more than happy to go into it in more detail with you. And now we're on to test case creation. We are confident at this stage that we have identified the test scope, and it is just a case of filling in the specific test data. We've picked the tenant-wide people we want to test and which workers we want to test against. And now we just start to fill in the test cases with workers, positions, etc. that are specific to your organization. We now want to pick the target objects to test against. We have put forward a recommended set but these vary depending on the security module of the subject we are testing. If we look at user-based security role, sorry, I've just gone ahead of myself a little bit there. If we first look at user-based security role, here you can see we have recommended the target object types for each object. Looking at the worker object, we recommend that you should check the subject's security against themselves, against a peer, against their manager. And we've done this for all the other object types too. Moving on to the role-based security, again, we have a number of recommended object types. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail here, but just to highlight, the focus of these tests, as I mentioned, is on the object where the role relates to, for example, the manager. And finally then, standard workers. We again have a recommended set of target types here also. So whenever we talk to our customers, we really are always asked, how many security tests should I create and run to get the test coverage that I need? Well, using the test strategy I've just outlined to create the tests, we have around 1,600 tests in total. We believe this is a good set of tests for security testing, but I know Christian and Greg are going to talk in more detail about the numbers they have, and I believe that these are in excess of this number, could be multiples of it even. But this is definitely a great set to start with. Next, we need to set our expected results, what the subject should or should not do against a chosen target. So for example here, we have our test subject of Logan McNeil, we have our target object of Alain Dubois, and we go down and we set our expected results, whether they should or should not be available to Logan McNeil. So in the example here, we can see that benefits, change benefits, our expected result is that would not be accessible to Logan, but that view dependence would. And we continue on to build our test cases up in this manner, changing our test subjects and our target objects as we go. And finally, we get to test execution. Your strategy and test cases will only need to be created once, maybe slightly tweaked as you go. But you will need to execute the test cases each time a change happens, that the actual test results match the expected results, and if not, then any necessary changes are made to your security configuration. We recommend initially starting with a subset of the full set of tests, and this really is to validate the test strategy and the results, and then once you're comfortable with that, to extend to the full set. So I've now gone through the 6 steps on how we go about creating our test strategy. We agree our test subjects, the test target types, and the test case coverage. We start to fill out the test targets with this data specific to your tenant. We set the expected results. We run these tests, review the results, and make any changes to the security configuration if necessary. So when do you actually use your test strategy and your test cases? So I've broken this up into 2 sections. Let's look at implementation first. So I've overlaid the Workday implementation lifecycle here with our security test lifecycle. So ideally, during the architect phase, you would agree your test scope and create your test strategy. Then once we get into the P1 tenant, we'd start to build out your test packs. And just at the beginning of your P1 tenant, we would run the subsection of tests to validate that your test cases are now as you want them, that you're reporting on them correctly, and that your strategy is perfect for you. You'd refine and monitor your tests and execute them all the way through your configure and prototype phase into the test cycles of end-to-end and UAT, and then finally into your gold tenant, where you will run your testing just before you deploy into production. So for customers who are in production, when should you run your security testing? Well, any time that you have a major event in your tenant. So as I mentioned earlier, a major event could be a reorganization, it could be an acquisition, it could be workers moving roles, it could be, I've talked to a lot of customers where they've been streamlining the number of security roles and groups that they have. Anytime you do that, you need to run your security tests. Similarly, if you're making any business as usual changes. And then of course, we have our weekly service update testing and our Workday major update testing twice a year. So I'm now just going to bring you through an overview of how the Kainos Smart product can help you to streamline this process. So Kainos Smart is the only automated testing product specifically designed for Workday. It contains 3 modules. 2 of those relate to business process and integration testing for HCM and financials, and the one I'm going to show you an overview of today, which is our security module, which tests field and action level security. It's software as a service, which means it's hosted in the cloud, and you can point at any non-production Workday tenant, so any sandbox or sandbox preview tenant or any number of implementation tenants that you have. There are a number of wizards within Smart that allow you to quickly and easily create your test cases. And I've shown you a screenshot here of how you can do this. Now, the important thing to realize is that when we point Smart at one of your Workday tenants, anything that you see in type aheads or drop downs or search functionality is actually the data that's in your tenant. So we allow you to specifically test or specifically select test subjects and test objects from your tenant, and then create the expected results based on the expected results in your tenant at that time. So what does that really mean? Again, if we relate back to Logan McNeil and Alan Dubois, we would select Logan McNeil as our test subject, Alan Dubois as our target object, and through our wizard, we would set our expected and our actual results to be as we expect them to be. And what we will do then is we will execute them. So within Smart, with a single click, we allow you to execute the tests against the Workday tenant that you choose. Smart will go through the Workday tenant and it will check to ensure that your expected results match your actual results. Now, as we can see here, this is a test run with 9 test cases that I've executed. 7 of them have passed and 2 of them have failed. If something is passed, it means your expected results meet your actual results. But let's look at something if it fails. So again, we can look at it's marked as failed, the first row here. It's marked as failed. I'm going to click on it because Smart allows you to drill in to see exactly what's happened. Now by drilling in, again, we can see that my user is Logan McNeil, that I'm testing against an employee, and the object is Alan Dubois. In this instance, I'm testing against compensation. I have my expected results of what Logan should have access to against Alan Dubois, and Smart has marked the actual results. Now, if these match, obviously we get a pass, but if it fails, Smart will mark it as a fail, and again, we'll take a screenshot of exactly what has happened in Workday at that time. So again, similar to as we've seen earlier, we have our test subject. This is the screenshot Smart has taken from my Workday tenant. Our test subject is Logan McNeil. Our target object is Alan Dubois. And we can see now that we have an actual result, that we were testing compensation add stock grant. Our expected result was that it should not be available to Logan McNeil, but we can see that within Workday it is actually available, and Smart would mark this as a fail. Now the beauty about Smart, and it's one of the things that I mentioned earlier, is that you need to be able to easily and quickly re-execute your tests. So this again can be done by clicking on the re-execute button within Smart. So if we have a test run that we've already executed and we want to rerun it, be it because a major event has happened or we want to point at a different tenant, we just click on the re-execute button. Now we're given an option here of whether we can run this now or we can schedule to run it at a later date. Now a lot of our customers I know run this every Monday morning at 3 a.m. So they would schedule it to kick off at 3 a.m. in the morning after the Workday weekly update, and when they get into work at 8 or 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, the results are there for them. They're able to go in and verify that it's all green, everything is matched, or if there are any differences, that they can go in and investigate their security configuration, find out why there is a difference from the last time it's executed, and make any necessary changes. We also allow you to point at any number of tenants. So here we have, I just have one Workday tenant configured with Kainos Smart, which is our GMS tenant. But if you had multiple tenants configured, then they would appear here and you could select whichever one you would like to execute against. Now that was a very, very quick run through of the Kainos Smart security module. And as Rory mentioned earlier, we'd be more than happy to go into more detail with you if you want to contact us about it. But at this stage, Rory, I'm just going to pass back to you now so we can hear from our customers, Greg and Christian.
Thank you very much, Will. Excellent presentation. Greg, I think we will be hearing from you first. So if you just want to click to the next slide there, Will, for Greg. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Greg Holliday, Director of HRIS from SCI. Greg, are you there?
You might be muted, Greg. Rory, do you want me
Yeah.
to flick onto Christian's slides? And
Yeah,
we'll come back
then I think Greg's maybe having a technical issue with his microphone. So if you want to go forward on to Christian's slides there. Christian, are you on the line okay?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hi, Christian. So if we just go to yourself first then, Christian, and we'll then go to Greg. So introducing Christian Sykins, Change and Release Manager from AstraZeneca.
Okay, hello. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. So, hello, I'm Christian from AstraZeneca. We went live with Workday in May last year. The main modules we are using are HR Core and Performance and Talent Management. We have a couple of others that we are currently implementing. And we have implemented Workday in a total of 65 different countries. And so the go live was in May, and then in June we started using Smart. So we started a training so well in advance of the first major release that was in August. So this is actually a screenshot of a slide I presented at Workday Rising last year. So if you look at our full security pack, at that time we had a total of 50,000 different security tests. So let me explain on that. So if you look first at the field permissions, so for example, what fields can a manager see on an employee? So you have 20 different fields available within Smart that you can test on. We did the test on a total of the 65 countries, and this is mainly because we have some differences in between the countries. For example, because of data privacy, in Russia, there's a different behavior on personal data for HR on employees compared to the other countries. We have some countries with specific rules on the payment elections, on the addresses, etc. And then we also defined a number of different scenarios. So for example, what can a manager see on an employee? What can HR admin see? What can an HR view only see? Same for talent and compensation roles. So if you add all those up, we had a total of 12 different scenarios. Similarly, on the available actions, at that time we did the testing on 57 different actions. That was with a feature release in August. Now in the latest release that we had in February, it was already 90 different available actions that we tested. So if you take a total of that, you come to the 50,000 tests. And to give an idea, it takes Smart about 2 hours and 20 minutes to finish that testing. So you can go to the next slide. So yeah, obviously 2 hours and 20 minutes is a lot of time. So if we need some quick validation on security, we also have created a mini pack of our scenarios, 20 different scenarios, but just for one country to do the validation on the different roles that we have in the system. And that's a pack that runs only a couple of minutes. So we use Smart, the security pack, in different ways. We do it every Monday as a kind of regression testing to make sure that nothing got broken both by Workday over the weekend with the service update and also by our own changes that we have made in the previous week in production. And yeah, it's a continuous exercise that we are doing to extend our security pack, so adding more scenarios, more objects, security roles, and also more exception testing. So it's a work that never stops.
Great, Christian. And if you don't mind, just sharing, Christian, typically what would be the most common type of security issues you would identify in your security test, and then, how many issues would you typically find?
Okay, so with the weekly regression testing that we do, like 99% of the fails that we get is because people are moving within the organization. So if you have set up a test for what you are expecting a manager to see on an employee and that manager would move to a different organizational unit, obviously your script would fail and you would see that So that's the majority of the fails we are seeing, but we have also, with the security pack, found some real issues like people being able to see more or less data than expected, which was caused by either an incorrect security role that was assigned or a new security role that was not correctly configured.
Great. And in the course of a typical year, what's the sort of major events that would cause you to execute your security testing?
So yeah, we have the weekly testing, that's the regression testing. Then you have the two big feature releases from Workday. So in those feature releases, we test the full security pack, the full 50,000 tests. And then we also support the different projects. So for example, the recruitment testing that is ongoing now, we support them as well. So if they have a new security role that they define part of the recruitment project, we will add that to the security pack and execute it for them to show that both the new role is working as expected and also that the existing roles are not broken. So we can execute that on the implementation tenant that they are using.
Great, thank you very much, Christian. Excellent presentation, and that I think that'll bring great value to the attendees. At this point, I think we've resolved the technical issues, and Greg's now on the line. Greg, can I hand over to you at this point? So introducing Greg Holliday, Director HRIS at SCI.
Yes, good morning. I'm back.
Good to have you, Greg.
Yeah, glad to be here. As Rory mentioned, my name is Greg Holliday with Service Corporation International, or SCI. SCI is North America's largest provider of death care services and products. We have approximately 2,500 locations across the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico. We've been live on Workday since July of 2014, and we went big bang on the HCM side, manager self-service, employee self-service, absence benefits, time tracking, compensation, payroll. We covered it all. We began using the SMART product in June of 15, did some preliminary testing in preparation for the first update testing. What we focus on at SCI are several things. Of course, we look at the employee, ensure that they can't see what they shouldn't see and that they are able to access what they should. We also look at it from a manager perspective. Probably the biggest focus has been the administrative roles, and we have also a lot of special access roles that we test. We have a finance team, about 50 members that support our field locations, and they need to be able to see payroll and other sensitive information, but they only needed to see it for particular organizations. So it's very important that the security is right. So we focus on that on a regular basis. And we really, when thinking about how we use SMART, really falls into several categories here. We execute every Sunday evening following the weekly Workday updates, just to ensure that there's no surprises and that the security is still as we saw it the prior week. Also, as Will mentioned walking through, it's very helpful in the Workday update testing. And where I'm also seeing a lot of value in using SMART is for use on special projects.
Great, Greg. And I guess if I could just address the same couple of questions that I asked Christian. What's the most common type of issues that you find in your security testing at SCI? And again, if you're okay with sharing
Sure.
how many issues you find.
Very similar to Christian. We find issues when there's transfer or a non-manager is promoted to a manager, or a manager moves to a non-manager role. That's primarily what we see. It's really infrequent, though. We've done a good job, I believe, in standardizing our security across all groups. A manager role is the same for each of our groups. So as an example, it has really come into, it really benefited us following a Workday update. Several releases ago, there was an undocumented change to a security domain that secured this data for our finance team. And if we hadn't been utilizing SMART, we would have found out via our help desk that there were issues. So it helped us proactively modify that security before our end users actually knew there was an issue.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing that we're all trying to avoid is having our end users report us issues. One of the things that you mentioned there, Greg, was special projects, that sit outside the weekly patches or the twice yearly updates from Workday. Could you maybe give us an example of a special project and the impact that would have on your security configuration?
Right. So I'm in the middle of a finance transformation project, and we are adding additional segments so we can segregate employee expenses. So we're adding a department segment into Workday. As part of that project, I'm taking my test pack and I'm running it against the impl tenant that we're utilizing for this special project. And what's really changed is now not only are we using Cost Center, but we're in conjunction with Cost Center, we're using department. So there's an intersection security element that's very important for our a lot of our payroll compensation type of information. And so SMART's helping us ensure that the changes that we've made are indeed what we're expecting. So that's a good example of a special project.
Thanks, Greg. That's some great low-level detail there. I'm sure there's a lot of attendees on the webinar going through similar types of projects. Well, I can see that you're just getting us back online with the slides. So at this point, what I'd like to do is formally move into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Thank you very much to everyone who has submitted their questions. We had a number of requests via the question portal for people to receive the slide decks and requests of whether the slide deck will be sent out. So anyone who has asked to receive the slide deck via the question portal, we have your email address from your registration and we'll send that out to you directly. For anybody else in attendance who would like to receive this deck, if you want to send us an email, as you can see on screen there, to worksmart@kainos.com, we will certainly be happy to send you out the slide deck after the webinar. So let me just go through the first couple of questions here that I can see. I guess I'll start off with this one to yourself, Greg. This is a question from someone. We are just about to start system testing during our initial implementation. What advice or lessons learned could you share with us? So Greg, if I can go to you for that one first.
Yeah, sure. When we went live, we didn't have the SMART product, so it's something I think provides a lot of value. However, the most important thing, and Will touched on it going through, is make sure that you have a strategy. What are you trying to test? What are your expected results? I think furthermore, as you're looking at SMART, it's an augmentation. And it's a great tool. to ensure a lot of coverage, breadth, and depth, but it doesn't replace good planning and getting your hands in the system as well.
Great, thanks, Greg. Christian, is there anything you'd like to add on that one? If I just give you a refresher on the question, this is an organisation just starting into their system testing of initial implementation, and they're asking for advice or lessons learned.
Yeah, I would focus primarily on the different security roles that you have and check to see what access they have. Is it okay to feel they can see the available actions and focus on that first? Because you can, there's so much possible within Smart that you can easily feel like you're overwhelmed by the possibilities. So I would definitely focus on the main security roles that are in place to see that they give exactly what you're expecting.
Great, thanks, Christian. The next question that I see here, this is a hot topic at our stand at Workday Rising in Las Vegas last year. So Greg, if I maybe direct this one to yourself, does Smart produce any artifacts that can be used as evidence for auditors? You know, so that I'll let you pick that one up from a customer perspective.
Yeah, so it's been really great from an audit perspective. As it was shown on the screen a little bit ago, all the tests that are executed are there. All of the, you know, did it pass or fail? It's there. We've actually now provided roles for our auditors to go in and review the results without having to get one of my staff to walk them through the process. So the data's there, they can report on it, and it's a self-serve, which helps free up my staff to do other things.
Great. Christian, the next one I'll aim in your direction. So this is an organization. We are a 3,000 employee organization, so quite a bit smaller than either AstraZeneca or SCI. Could either Christian or Greg offer any advice on the level of security testing that particular organization should be aiming for?
Okay, so if it all depends obviously on the number of resources that you have available. So to give you an idea, we went to training with 3 different people in AstraZeneca. So myself as change and release manager, and then 1 person from a test team and 1 person from a security team. So it was about 4 days of training, I think. And then we had to spend about 2 weeks to get a security pack at a decent level, to have a good security pack that covers the different security roles and all the options that you have for testing. I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, that's great, Christian. Greg, is there anything that you'd like to add there? So a 3,000 employee organization, so it's quite a bit smaller than SCI in terms of number of employees. You know, what level of security do you think an organization like that should be aiming for?
Yeah, just thinking about it, I don't know that it really makes a huge difference whether it's 3,000 or 300,000. You still want to look at what are those roles and user-based groups that are important to you, and make sure you're looking at a good cross-section of your population. So to me, the approach, I don't think I would change it that much.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, that's exactly what we would see, and I think that was highlighted in Will's best practices as well. You know, the approach to security should be the same regardless of organization, because the risk is the same across organizations. Will, the next question is probably best directed at yourself. Does this include security access to business processes?
Thanks, Rory. Yeah, it absolutely does. Smart will check if the user has the ability to invoke the business process. So what it really does is it's a mixture of, you know, tests for business processes and tasks. So yes is the short answer.
Okay. And there's a question actually has come in on integrations. I'll pick this one up myself. You know, as I mentioned at the start, we're running a series of webinars, and integrations is going to be one of those topics that we will cover in a future session. Christian, next one is for yourself. How much maintenance of SMART is typically required in AstraZeneca?
It usually comes down to the Monday validation. So we schedule the security pack to launch after the weekly service update, and then usually we have between, I would say 2, 3 to a maximum of 5 fails of security tests because of people moving or getting terminated. So we have to verify why it failed and then pick a new employee or manager to replace it. So I would say about an hour, maximum 2 hours a week.
Great, thanks, Christian. And I guess, you know, a question that I can address to both of you. I'll start with you first, Greg. It's come in. You know, obviously, someone has looked at the product tour, and they're just wondering how long did it take to set up the tests. So maybe if I can go to you for that one first, Greg.
So let me just clarify the question. You're asking how long it took to develop our test pack?
Yeah. So how long did it take to set up your security test pack?
To get it to, we worked in really stages. So to get to the point where it was useful, it was probably about 3 weeks, and that was with people that were just newly trained, working in conjunction with Kainos consultants, and then we continue to refine. So 3 weeks to get to a usable product, usable set of test scenarios.
Okay, great. And Christian, I know that you had mentioned that you and some of your colleagues had come over to Kainos for training after the implementation handover within AstraZeneca. So after that training, you know, in terms of security, how long did it take you, do you think, to get your security pack set up?
Yeah, I would say it's the same here. Also the 3 weeks, because we had the 1 week where we had the training together with the Kainos people helping us starting up the security pack, and then after that we needed around about 2 weeks to get a decent pack up and running in the first feature release that we had. Great,
thanks, Christian. So there's also a question that's come up. I'll pick this one up myself. What Workday modules are supported, and is there a mini pack for LDP? In terms of the modules that are supported within Kainos Smart, we have coverage for core HCM, compensation, financials, absence, benefits. Two commonly requested areas within Workday are payroll and recruitment. Those are currently on our roadmap, and we have a plan to deliver those in the next 6 to 9 months. As regards the LDP, you know, and this is going back to, you know, to Greg's point really, the security methodology is equally applicable to LDP clients. It doesn't really matter the size of your organization, whether you've 2,000 employees or, as Greg says, 200,000 employees. Risk to your organization through a security issue is the same risk regardless of organizational size. So same methodology is totally applicable.
Rory, can I just make a clarification sort of on what you said there? It may have come across just a little bit. The security module actually covers all the areas of Workday at the moment, and what Rory was referring to there was the HCM and financials business process testing. So currently the security module covers all areas of Workday.
Great, thanks very much for the clarification. Well, and it actually leads into the final question I'm going to pick up on the session, and that's someone has asked, does Kainos provide a demo specific to business process testing? Yeah, you know, as you can see to that particular attendee, you can freely request a demonstration on our website. There's an inquiry form there where you can submit that, and we will contact you directly to set up a demonstration, and we'll tailor that demonstration to whatever your needs are, be it security, business processes, or integrations. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank everyone who joined the webinar today. We had great attendance. We've had more questions than we can probably pick up in this session. So what I will do is, as you can see on the screen here, we will be going back to anyone who submitted questions directly via email. We look forward to welcoming you to the next in this series, which will be on HCM business processes on June 7th, 2016. We will be sending out invitations over the coming weeks as to the start time and so on. I don't want to take up too much of your time today. I'm conscious that for us folks in Europe here, it's getting into the evening, and it's probably getting to lunchtime on the East Coast and Central Time Zone of the US. So finally, before I go, I'd like to thank Will Murray for his excellent presentation. Again, thank you to everyone for their attendance and submitting their questions. And finally, I'd like to reserve a very special thank you to Christian and Greg for sharing their experience and wealth of knowledge with us all today. If anybody wants to submit any feedback on the webinar, we'll be delighted to receive your views and comments. And we look forward to presenting to you again in the next webinar in this series. Jill, at this point, I'll hand back to you to close the webinar.
Thank you very much, Rory, and thank you, Will, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Workday Testing Best Practices. If you do have any other questions, please do contact smart@kainos.com. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. So if you could keep your browser window open for a moment, and you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kainos Smart and our presenters, thank you for joining us, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.